Chapter 4, A New Friend. I was surprised twice that evening. First, that Mr. Mendoza was getting married, and next because Mom and Dad had done a mountain of dishes for me. Then the next morning, I was surprised again when, instead of going to church, we went to our new house with a load of stuff. It was the stuff that Mom thought too precious to load up in a truck, a painting she had bought in Mexico, and the fancy dinner plates my parents had washed the night before. She also had her special loot, her jewelry, and lots of boxes of shoes. Mom loves her shoes. I brought along my most prized possessions, my folklórico skirts, and Dad took the baseball glove from his childhood. If I ever lost my favorite glove, Dad said as he maneuvered our van up one street and down another, I would lose myself. I understood what Dad meant. I could see that Mom did too, even though Dad sounded like a poet who doesn't make sense. We got lost in a new neighborhood. I think I take a left here, Dad argued with himself. I was thinking, no, it's right, but I kept my mouth shut. I sat buckled in the back seat, turning over in my mind what Mr. Mendoza had said. Was he kidding about getting married? Miss Mendoza had seemed a little angry and had even stomped her foot when he announced the news in front of the Senior Citizen Center. But they hadn't discussed it anymore, probably because I was there. Instead, we walked home in silence, except when Mr. Mendoza whistled. In time, Dad found the house. As we parked our van in the driveway, I had to admit that I liked our new house. It was prettier than our apartment building, and the neighborhood was quiet. While Mom and Dad went happily inside, I stayed outside to size up the new place. I was still sorry about moving away from Chicago, but the house was growing on me. I felt happier than I had yesterday when I was here. I kicked through the fall leaves and tossed some into the air. I stopped when someone behind me chirped, "Hi." I turned and there she was, the girl I had seen the day before from my bedroom window. Her brown hair was tied up in a ponytail. She wore another sweater that hid her hands, but she pulled up her sleeves when she caught me looking at them. Her fingernails were polished red, like she had dipped them in jam. "Hi," I greeted her in return. I told her my name. Say it again, she said. Marisol, I repeated, pronouncing each syllable slowly for her. Spell it? She asked, confused. I spelled it for her. Marisol, the name of my grandmother, and I think the name of one of my dad's girlfriends before he met Mom. She said her name was Karen Johnson. I said there was a girl in my ballet folklórico troupe named Karen. You dance? Asked Karen. Happiness spread across her face as she stood on her tiptoes for a second. Yeah, I answered. You too? When she nodded her head, her ponytail bounced. I realized I was starting to realize I was starting to really like my new home, and I liked it even more when Karen invited me to her house, well, actually, to her front yard, where she had been raking leaves into 3 piles. Each of the piles came up to my knees, but when we scooted and raked all of them together, the pile came up to her waist. What now? I asked. This, Karen answered. She backed up, took 6 running steps, and jumped into the pile. We raked the leaves into a pile again, and then it was my turn. I took a running start and, holding my breath, flew into the pile. It was a total rush. I got up, dizzy with happiness. Leaves crowned my hair. Cool, I said. We leaped into the pile a couple more times and then sat on the lawn, twirling leaves by their stems. Look, they're dancing, I said, laughing, just like us. Actually, Karen confided, I'm not dancing anymore. She stopped twirling the leaf in her hand. Why not? I asked. Our teacher got married and moved away. This piece of news stopped me. Did that mean that there wasn't a dance studio here? I asked. What kind of dance did she teach? Everything, she answered. You know, like tap, modern, jazz, ballet. I've tried some of those, but I'm not very good at ballet, I admitted. I'm sure you are, Karen said sweetly. Well, I keep trying, but there's no ballet teacher that won't ever be able to get better, I said. But I told Karen about my ballet folklórico troupe and that we were learning El Caiman. I jumped up, grabbed her hand, and pulled her to her feet. Want me to teach you? I asked. Her smile lifted her cheeks and narrowed her eyes into shiny triangles as she nodded. She gazed over my shoulder at my house. Do you have your dance stuff with you now? I love those costumes you wear. You're so pretty. I told her that we hadn't moved in, but that I had my folklórico skirts, the 3 that I owned, with me. Although we had known each other for only a few minutes, we were already friends. Without a word, we took off running toward our houses. Karen flew up her steps and I flew up mine. Minutes later, we reappeared with our dance stuff. First, I showed her my Veracruz skirt, being careful not to let it drag on the lawn. Then we climbed up on her porch and I handed her my bright yellow Jalisco skirt. She brought out her favorite tutu and explained that her teacher had left it, along with some other costumes, for when, not if, another studio got started. The tutu was made of a deep purple tulle with purple and black lace. The last principal dancer who wore this was really beautiful, Karen told me. I wanted to dance just like her, to be her. She paused. I hope we find another teacher soon. I nodded, thinking that ballet would be fun if I could do it with Karen. She pressed my Jalisco skirt up to her body and said, "Your skirts are so swirly." I held the tutu up to me. "This is so great," I gushed. I haven't been doing ballet long enough to even dream of wearing a fancy tutu. I was still in a pink leotard, but this was so gorgeous that I wish I were good enough to wear it. I tiptoed like a ballerina. I arched my arms into a circle as if I were drawing the world. And there on a porch, holding on to that purple tutu, I started to get that excited feeling that I always get when I dance. I love this tutu, and this color, I said. Me too, Karen said. Actually, I love everything about ballet. I don't even mind the hard work it takes because I know every ballerina has to go through that. That's what my teacher said. She was so terrific. I really miss her. Karen looked a little sad. You would have liked her. I nodded sympathetically. Come on inside, Karen said, brightening. I don't want to get any of these dirty. We gathered up our costumes and went into Karen's house. I was careful to wipe my feet. The floors were wood, good for dancing. They were shiny enough for me to see my face. Only the stairs were carpeted. We stomped up the carpeted stairway to Karen's room. Wow, I exclaimed as I marveled at the shelves of stuffed animals. You sure have a lot of stuffed animals. That's because I have a lot of uncles who spoil me. I like your bed, I said. It had a canopy, and the bedspread was frilly, like the lace of my Veracruz costume. I walked to the window that faced my bedroom. I could see Dad doing something in there. He seemed really tall, much taller than usual. When he moved again and was suddenly shorter, I realized that he had been standing on a chair to change a light bulb. But I saw him hold up his baseball glove and start yapping and open and close like the mouth of an alligator. I could imagine Mom laughing at him. Crazy Dad, I thought. Karen and I tried on each other's dance outfits. When Karen twirled, my Jalisco skirt flared beautifully and slowly collapsed like a parachute. You look great, I said, like you were born for it. I twirled, but the stiff tutu didn't flutter. It was the first time I'd ever put on a tutu, and I felt different, almost like a real ballerina. I was busy imagining myself floating across the stage as the Sugar Plum Fairy and the Nutcracker when Karen did a hitch kick. I came back to reality and did one too, and suddenly we were in the chorus line, Karen and I kicking our legs up and laughing. But our laughter stopped when Karen's mom appeared in the doorway. We're busted, I thought. What do we have here? Her mother asked, smiling. The Rockettes? I know a real Rockette, I said. Only now she lives in Chicago. Karen's mom held up my Veracruz skirt and cooed, "It's very pretty," but she brought from her apron pocket 4 homemade oatmeal cookies. We took off our dance things before sitting cross-legged on the bed with our cookies. I ate mine carefully, with my hand under my mouth to catch the crumbs. I wanted to show I had grown-up manners, though when Karen turned her back, I vacuumed up the crumbs from my palm. Which you like better? Karen asked. What do you mean? I said. For a moment, I thought she was asking about the cookies. Ballet or ballet folklórico, or jazz. Instinctively, I shrugged. I like them all, but ballet is definitely the hardest. I think it's hard for everyone, Karen replied, but I just absolutely, positively love it. I was born to be a ballerina. With a twinkle in her eye, she grabbed my hand, pulled me off the bed, and started spinning me like a top. I grabbed her other hand, and then we were turning around together face to face. Next, without even planning it, we locked arms and did some crazy hoedown turns before we collapsed, giggling on the floor. On the drive home, I thought about Karen, the Rockettes, and Miss Mendoza. Since Karen's teacher was gone, maybe Miss Mendoza really could start a studio in Des Plaines. She could rent a studio with lots of mirrors. There would be lines of girls doing hitch kicks to the ceiling, and I would be one of them. Mom asked about Karen, and I told her what I knew. That Karen was a fourth grader like me, that she was also a dancer, that she had more stuffed toys in a small toy store, and that her mom was nice. I also said that Mrs. Johnson was a good cook. How do you know that? Mom asked. I held the 2 oatmeal cookies nearly as large as Frisbees and gave one to each of my parents. She sent these home for you too, I said. When we got home, back to our apartment, I found Victor on the front steps. He was sitting with his cheeks in his palms. A popsicle stick lay at his feet. I noticed the wooden stick had a couple of teeth marks. It's all gone, huh? I asked. His eyes appeared as if they might leak big fat tears. He nodded his head. I ran inside to my bedroom, where I listened to the sound of dancing feet. I heard nothing but the quiet shuffling of Mr. Mendoza's slippers, but I heard the squeak of a recliner. No doubt Mr. Mendoza had bailed into a soft spot. He's getting married, I told my stuffed animals. I pictured him walking down the aisle of St. Mary's Church in his slippers, while his furry face resembled raccoons. But I heard Miss Mendoza's swift steps. She was home after all. Excited, I hollered as I danced through the living room toward the front door. Mom, I'll be right back. Mom was writing down messages from the answering machine. I skipped up a flight of steps to Mr. Mendoza's apartment and knocked. I heard soft steps and in the next second felt the breeze on the open door. Hi, Miss Mendoza greeted me. She was dressed in black dance pants and a t-shirt. She told me to come in, and I rushed in like the wind. I have an idea, I burst out as I stepped into the living room. Miss Mendoza raised her eyebrows as if to ask, and what is that? I gazed over at Mr. Mendoza asleep in his recliner with a magazine in his lap. I was amazed. He had just sat down in his recliner 3 minutes ago, and already he was asleep. His mouth was issuing a snore. His glasses had slipped down his nose. Let's go into the kitchen, I suggested, not wanting to wake him up. I remembered the kitchen very well. When I was 6, Dad had made me help get Mr. Mendoza's kitchen from under the stove. My arms were really skinny, and they could reach far. Miss Mendoza led me into the kitchen, where we sat at the table. Okay, what big ideas do you have, sweetheart? Miss Mendoza asked. She read my mind, I thought. We're in tune. She knows I've got a big idea. You know we're moving, I said. She nodded her head. But it's not far away. My attention was drawn briefly to the clock on the far wall. It was owl-shaped. The eyes swiveled left, then right with each second. Well, I really don't want to move for a zillion reasons. Give me one, Miss Mendoza said. Only one? I thought. I sat up straight. For one, I won't be able to take dance anymore, ballet or ballet folklórico. My friend there, her name is Karen, said that the dance teacher in Des Plaines moved away. And I was thinking... I let my words hang in the air before I continued. I was thinking that maybe, since your father's getting married and all, maybe you could start a dance studio out there where we're moving. When Miss Mendoza didn't clap her hands together and scream, "What a great idea!" I added. And I could be your first student. I told her again about Karen's teacher closing her studio and how I had checked the telephone book at our new house and found no other dance studio listed near our house. Miss Mendoza munched her lower lip, scraping away some of her lipstick. Now, how would I get there to teach? I don't drive, and it's far, Des Plaines. I pointed out the window. It's not that far, I said. You can practically see it from here. Great. You're not only good at dancing, but brilliant at geography, she said, laughing. I laughed, too. It's really not far, and you can't see it from here, I answered. Dad got lost only once. Miss Mendoza smiled. She rose and went to the kitchen sink for a glass of water. She asked if I wanted something to drink, but I smacked my lips to assess my thirst. I shook my head. No thanks, I'm fine. Miss Mendoza returned to the kitchen table. Then I said, you can move in with us. We have plenty of room. There's even an extra bedroom. I told her how big her house was and that it had lots of trees, and I even described the piles of leaves and how Karen and I had jumped in them. Yes, I see. Miss Mendoza reached over and plucked a leaf that was caught in my hair. She twirled it between her fingers, making a dance. Sweetie, you're such a dreamer. Her eyes kept to the doorway and the not so far away sounds of snoring. What about my dad? She asked. But he's getting married, I repeated. He doesn't need you now. You said so yourself. And I really need a dance teacher. I don't think he's really getting married, Marisol. He's a dreamer and a big flirt, and is always saying things like that. She said that she had to stay with him and that she would find a job nearby. And even if he does get married, I'm probably going to stay here in Chicago. You'll find a teacher, and a good one, I'm sure. I felt what Victor felt when his response was all gone, sad. What was I going to do now? We sat in silence. The owl-shaped clock swiveled its eyes. I held my head down and, for some reason, I began to swivel my eyes as well. The funny thing was that, when I raised my face, I saw that Miss Mendoza's own eyes were keeping rhythm from to the clock, too. We laughed. We laughed harder and with our mouths open. And we laughed even harder when Mr. Mendoza shoveled into the room asking, "What's so funny?" "The clock," we answered. Mr. Mendoza slowly raised his face to the clock. He studied it for the longest time before mumbling, "Yeah, it is a pretty funny clock." He chucked in his slippers back to the living room, grumbling that we should have awakened him for his favorite program, Animal Adventures. I had to try a second time. "Well, what do you think?" I asked Miss Mendoza. Of course I am a dreamer, but without dreams, what is life? About starting a dance studio out in the suburbs? She looked out the window. "I can see you're a quick study, Marisol, and determined. It'd be fun to be your teacher, but I can't." I thought I had lost her, but then she kept talking. She said she realized that her father wasn't as helpless as he had described in the letter that he had written her, the one that had brought her back home. You know what he did before he sent that letter?" She roared. "He sprinkled some water on it and said it was his tears." She slapped her thighs. "Can you believe that? He's such a bad boy. Muy malo." We heard the sounds of an elephant trumpeting on the television. "But what am I going to do if I don't have a dance studio?" "Karen said they don't teach dance in her school," I said quietly, "and Mom won't talk about it. How am I supposed to be a dancer if I have no one to teach me?" "And who's this Karen again?" Miss Mendoza asked. "Karen lives next door," I repeated. Again my arms swung up to the point in the direction of Des Plaines. "Karen does modern and ballet and stuff." "And stuff?" I could see that I had insulted Miss Mendoza. "You know, traditional ballet and the kind of dancing you do." I propped a grin on my face. "Come on, can't you at least visit my new school to see if you can teach there? After school or something?" "You mean teach my stuff?" "I mean dance." "Well, you can't just do the stuff you like. I may consider teaching you folklórico if you keep up your traditional ballet." "But how? There's no school there." "You'll find one if you're serious." We grew silent. We could make out the laughter of a hyena on the television and the laughter of Mr. Mendoza. Silence, more silence. The owl's eyes went left, right, left, right. "So, do you want to try some of my stuff right now?" Miss Mendoza asked. Before he could answer, Miss Mendoza left the room and returned with a glittery pink top hat and a cane. She also produced a pair of shoes and said, "These were mine when I was your age. Go ahead and put them on." I took the shoes, noticing the toes were a little scratched, and put them on. They were a perfect fit. I took a few steps across the floor and into the living room and felt like I was walking on spoons. I like the sound, I said, beaming my happiness down to the tap shoes. But Miss Mendoza wrapped a pink fringe skirt around my waist, and we started to dance. Miss Mendoza took my hand. She told me to tap, tap, tap a toe, and then land on the heel. Shuffle right, shuffle left, with a big finish with a cane on the arm and top hat aloft. We danced for nearly an hour. I feel like a rocket, I said. We were all smiles. If I were a flower, I would have been blooming at that moment. Okay, that was your first lesson, Miss Mendoza said with her eyes twinkling, and I'm not even going to charge you. I took off her tap shoes and the pink skirt and began to stretch on the floor. My head touched my knees. You have a nice stretch, Miss Mendoza remarked. Once I was able to put my leg behind my head, I said proudly. When was that? Miss Mendoza asked suspiciously. When I was a baby. That's what Mom says. Miss Mendoza laughed and asked, and did you put your toes in your mouth? Probably, I said, and laughed with my hand over my mouth. But we sat in silence. Miss Mendoza asked, what's your friend's name again? The one at your new place. Karen? With her head against the back of the sofa, Miss Mendoza looked up at the ceiling. And where's this planes? She asked, still breathless from dancing. I had her. I pointed again, and we both laughed. But it's only maybe, Marisol, she insisted.